There is a client in almost every service business that the owner keeps for longer than they should. Not because the work is going badly, not because there is a conflict, but because on paper the client looks fine. They pay. They are not difficult in any dramatic way. The relationship is functional, and yet something about serving them consistently costs more than the invoice reflects. I kept a client like this for almost 2 years before I understood what was actually happening. The revenue was real. The cost was also real. I just had not been measuring the right things. Most service businesses measure client value by what comes in, the invoice amount, the payment reliability, maybe the referral potential. What they almost never measure is what goes out in return. Not just the direct delivery time, but the full cost of maintaining that client relationship. The emails that require careful handling, the scope that expands incrementally without the price following, the check-ins that exist not because the project requires them, but because the client needs reassurance. The revisions that come not from unclear deliverables, but from unclear expectations that were never properly set at the start. None of that shows up in the invoice. All of it shows up in your capacity. You look at your revenue and the numbers make sense. But something about the month felt harder than it should have. More emails, more back and forth, more energy spent than the invoice reflects. That gap has a name. It is called client margin erosion. The difference between what a client pays and what they actually cost the business once you count the attention, the scope creep, and the relationship overhead. It is one of the most common reasons a growing business stays unprofitable despite having paying clients. The fix starts with measurement. Not just revenue per client, but margin per client. What does each client relationship actually cost in time, attention, and operational overhead relative to what it generates? That calculation will surface the clients who look profitable but are not. And it will usually surprise you. The highest invoice is rarely the highest margin. And the most demanding client is almost never the most valuable one. Some of your lowest paying clients consume more of your business than your highest paying ones. Not because they are difficult exactly, because the relationship was never structured properly. The unclear expectations, the unnecessary revisions, the check-ins that should not be needed. None of that shows up in the invoice. All of it shows up in your capacity. That invisible cost is called relationship tax. And until you learn to measure it, you will keep wondering why the business feels harder than the revenue suggests it should. Reducing relationship tax requires going back to the structure of the client relationship itself. How were expectations set at the start? What is the documented scope? What is the communication protocol? What happens when scope expands? Most of these things were either never established or were established informally in a way that leaves too much room for ambiguity. Ambiguity is expensive. Every ambiguous expectation eventually becomes a conversation that costs time. Every unclear boundary eventually becomes a situation that costs energy. The most efficient client relationships I have had were not with the clients who asked the least of me. They were with the clients where the structure of the engagement was the clearest, where both sides knew exactly what was included and what was not, where the communication had a defined rhythm, where scope changes had a defined process. That clarity did not make the relationship cold. It made it clean. And clean relationships cost dramatically less to maintain than ambiguous ones. There is a second cost that most builders never account for: the opportunity cost of the wrong client. You took the client because you needed the revenue, but something about the work never felt quite right. It was not your best work. It was not the direction you wanted to go. And every hour spent on it was an hour not spent building the thing that was actually going to matter. That is called opportunity cost drag. The client is not just costing you money, they are costing you trajectory. And trajectory is the thing that determines where you end up years from now, not what you earn this month. I spent a significant period of my business serving clients who were perfectly reasonable, but who were pulling my attention and my expertise away from the direction I needed to be building in. The revenue was real. The cost to my trajectory was also real. I just could not see it until I was far enough down the wrong road to feel the distance from where I wanted to be. Being selective about clients is not a luxury available only to established businesses. It is a structural requirement for any business that wants to develop genuine expertise and positioning over time. Every client you take shapes what you become good at. Every project you complete builds the case study library that determines who finds you next. Taking clients who do not align with the direction you are building in does not just cost you time. It actively builds the wrong version of your business. The question to ask about every client relationship is not just, can I serve this person? It is, does serving this person build the business I am trying to build? When the answer is no, the revenue they bring is rarely worth the trajectory cost of taking them. Measuring client margin, reducing relationship tax, being honest about opportunity cost drag. These are not advanced concepts for established businesses. They are foundational decisions that determine whether a service business compounds or just survives. The clients who cost more than they pay are in almost every business. The ones who thrive are the ones who learn to see them clearly and make deliberate decisions about how long they stay. Next, we are going to look at something that happens to the best work in almost every business. Why your best work goes unnoticed, and what the structural reason behind it actually is. I will see you tomorrow.